Wolves are reportedly interested in Getafe forward Christantus Uche. In this video, I'm going to be speaking a bit about what it means tactically for Wolves, what Uche is as a player and what he would bring to Wolves, and my final thoughts on Uche as a signing. So let's get straight into this one. Last season, Christantus Uche managed 10 goal contributions in all competitions for Getafe. The 22-year-old Nigerian forward was absolutely brilliant to watch on the eye and has all the things I think to be a top player. Now, just 2 years ago, he was playing in the third division of Spanish football, and now he is tearing it up in La Liga. So it's absolutely brilliant to see the path that he's gone on, and he's come on leaps and bounds in the last 2 to 3 years, really. Now, as you can see here, it looks probably a bit concerning for those of you looking at all the non-penalty goals and stuff like that, but when you look at the assists, he's so creative, and the fact that he plays out wide a hell of a lot off that left flank is very important in this. He's also one of these players that perhaps you wouldn't associate with being that sort of technical, silky dribbler, someone that wants to get on the ball, make things happen, but he really is. Despite being 6'3", he has all of that in abundance as well. Now, as you can see here, he creates 3.404 shot creating actions per 90 on average, which is absolutely brilliant. And again, that's something that I think Wolves have been lacking, especially in pre-season. They haven't been creating anywhere near enough, and they need that injection of creativity, because ultimately the only way you're going to stay up or compete in the Premier League is by having an ounce of creativity, and they don't really have that at the moment. As you can see here as well, as I briefly mentioned there, 1.27 successful take-ons per 90 for someone of his height, for someone of his physical sort of presence. I think that's a really impressive statistic as well. But the one thing I want to highlight here, and the one thing that we didn't see enough last season with Matheus Cunha, and really Wolves are going to need this season, is this: all of the defensive attributes that he possesses. He wins 3.29 aerials per 90. Obviously, for a big player, you expect that. But, for example, Jürgen Strand-Larsen's an excellent sort of, a big physical presence, but he's nowhere near good enough in the air. So I think that's a very important thing to look at as well. But as you can see here, he's in the top 9% for tackles. He's in the top 12% for interceptions, and in the top 21% for blocks as players who play in a forward blind position. And that's something that's really interesting for me as well, because obviously we know Marshall Monetzi's got the work rate. He has that work rate, but he has nowhere near enough the technical quality to be at the highest level and to be a useful asset for Wolves in those smaller games, in those games when, Wolves are really struggling. They need creativity. Marshall Monetzi's there getting 3 offsides against Manchester City. So it's one of them. I think for me, he has the work rate that Monetzi has. He has the ability that, other players have got, and he's got more ability than most players in this current squad as well. And I do think overall he's one of these players that would succeed in the Premier League because of his physical stature, because of his his willingness to take on players, to beat players, but also to bring the ball forward for his team as well. He averages 1.63 progressive carries per 90 as well. So generally, he's one of these players that wants to get on the ball. He's not afraid to take a man on. He's not afraid to dribble. But he has that technical quality to make something happen at the end of it, as you can see by his shot creating actions there. So I think it's a really interesting signing from that perspective. He started the season really impressively as well. He managed 1 goal and 1 assist in a 2-0 win against Celta Vigo most recently. And he was absolutely brilliant in that game. As you can see here, he scored a goal, of course. He got the assist. But he created 3 chances in that game, managed 3 successful dribbles in that game, and managed 9 touches in the opposition box. And that's something, again, that Wolves didn't do a hell of a lot of, really, against Manchester City. They didn't have the ball in the opposition's box that much. And if they did, Ruben Diaz would just cut it out and get rid of it. And we've seen that in pre-season as well. Now, as you can also see here, he's won 2 fouls, which, again, for me, Wolves don't do a hell of a lot, really. They used to last season, obviously, with Matheus Cunha playing off that left flank. But Wolves don't win anywhere near enough fouls. And ultimately, again, they're not really anywhere near enough dangerous in the air either. I mean, last season we saw a really poor corner record from Wolves, defending and offensively. And that's another thing that I think Uche would add. He'd be able to defend the corners. He'd be able to attack the corners. And that's the most important thing, because Wolves need to be a threat in as many areas as they possibly can if they are going to be under the cosh this season. Now, when it comes to defending as well, it's really impressive. He's won 100% of his tackles. I know he's only won 1, but equally, he's won it at the end of the day. He's won 9 duels, by the way, which is just absolutely ludicrous in that game against Celta Vigo. 9 duels for a player that is an offensive player is absolutely brilliant. He won 3 aerial duels as well, and he recovered the ball 4 times. Now, that is absolutely brilliant. And of course, he did commit 5 fouls and get a yellow card, but at the end of the day, that shows his willingness to get the ball, to retrieve the ball, to also, win back possession for his team. and get his team on the front foot again. And I think that's something that Wolves don't have enough of, and didn't have enough of even last season when they were so good really in certain areas. Because Matheus Cunha was one of these players that if he would lose the ball, he wouldn't track back and get it. But Uche absolutely would do that for this side. Now, throughout the summer, I've been saying that Wolves are looking for those versatile players. They really have been. It looks like they were in for Rierson from Borussia Dortmund, a versatile player. Juan Luis Sanchez, a very versatile player. There's been so many players that they've looked at that they think could play in multiple positions, and I think that's definitely been a feature of their transfer business or their scouting going into this season. And again, it's completely the same for Christantus Uche. Now, as you can see here, he's played 19 games as a centre forward, 16 as a midfielder, 15 as a defensive midfielder, 13 as an attacking midfielder, 3 as a second striker, 1 as a left winger, 1 as a left midfielder, and that is absolutely brilliant. Again, for me, that's what you want to see. I think you want to see that sort of you want to see that sort of ability to play multiple positions, because if you have got a light squad and a squad that's particularly not great in quality, you want a player that can play to a decent level in all those positions, and I think that's what Uche would bring. Now, I think one thing, if you look at it, as you can see here, the goal contributions aren't unbelievable. Of course, 11 of them, have come in the last season and the start of this season and last season. So it is definitely one of them that's very concerning, maybe for some people looking at it. But for me, that shows a clear progression in the player itself. I mean, 1 game, 1 goal, 1 assist already this season is brilliant. And then, of course, he ended the season really strongly last season as well. So for me, I think Uche is very good in terms of, I think he's got that clear, career trajectory where he's obviously on the up. And I think Wolves should get in there early and try and get him as efficiently as they can, because they need to get players through the door and players of quality. It's not just about getting players in that are nowhere near good enough. They need quality, and for me, Uche possesses a lot of that quality. Now, the one thing I want to touch on as well with Uche is his injury history, as we always do in these videos. And as you can see, no injury history. Now, I know he is only 22, but often you can see players have still had injuries, and he's been around for around 78, 80 games. So, he needs to be playing football, and ultimately he hasn't got injured yet, so that's the main thing really as well. I think Wolves don't want to be signing players that are in that ballpark of injury prone or consistently or frequently injured. That I don't think Wolves should be shopping in there really, to be honest. So I do think Uche would be great for that reason as well. Now, obviously last season Matheus Cunha played off the left, and for me I think this is where Uche will play. So let's break it down tactically. Now, tactically, Uche is a really interesting option for Wolves going into next season. Now, having started the season, we've seen Arias play off the left, and we've also seen Arias operate off that channel throughout pre-season when he has played, obviously, the Celta Vigo game, and we saw it briefly when he came on against Manchester City. Now, do I think Arias will continue to play there? No. Now, in terms of Jean Arias, his best football throughout his career has always been off the right. That is, well documented. It's pretty clear to see that Arias is most effective off that right-hand side. And that's why I think the signing of Uche, or the potential signing of Uche, makes things very, very interesting. Now, I think Wolves ultimately get the best out of Arias if he is on that opposite side to where he has currently been playing for Wolves. So I do think he will eventually be moved there. That leaves a very weird situation for the likes of Fer Lopez, who ultimately, again, best position off the right-hand side. You've signed him for a very, very decent fee. And ultimately, he is good enough to start, in my personal opinion. But again, that makes it very interesting. Now, of course, Uche is also able backup to Strand Larsen. He can play in that number 9 position. We haven't seen it a ridiculous amount, but he can play there if needed. But for me, this is how Wolves will line up for the remainder of the season. Obviously, Mosquera will be in there as well. But for now, obviously, Matt Doherty is in there as well. So, when you look at it, obviously Chichua is another player that I've briefly mentioned on this channel, and I do think he wants to get on the overlap. He wants to get to that byline on the right-hand side. And Arias obviously wants, he'll have an advanced fullback in it, and he'd love that. But on the left-hand side, I think it's really interesting. Again, as I've said, Uche is one of these players that operates anywhere in this space. He wants to operate anywhere on the left-hand side, and that's where his best football was played last season. So for me, Uche will be in and around that position, and I do think that's probably where he will start for Wolves if he was to come in. Now, Uche is another player, again, that is very direct, and he'll want to get in these areas and join Strand Larsen, maybe get on the end of a Chichua cross from this side, or get on the end of an Arias cross, or they'll all end up being this sort of in this similar position, in my personal opinion, because they are all very sort of advanced players, and both of the wide men are pretty much inside forwards. They want to get in that box. They want to make things happen, and Arias and Uche are very similar in that aspect. Now, in terms of what does that mean for Molovolfa down that that left flank, and I think what we'll see next season is a hell of a lot of this if Uche does come in. I think we'll see a hell of a lot of this underlaps, overlaps throughout the season. I think it'll be a pretty consistent theme of what Wolves do next year. And I do think that Uche getting into these areas allows Muller-Wolfer to just bomb on, just allows him to bomb on in here. Also, he loves a cutback, Muller-Wolfer. That is where his best sort of assists have come from in his time at AZ Alkmaar. So I do think Uche getting into these areas and overloading the box with the likes of Strand Larsen, Arias potentially arriving at the back post as well. It could look very similar to something like this in attack next season, with Chachua maybe in and around there. And I think Joao Gomez will be a lot higher as well, because he has been playing that way throughout pre-season and against Manchester City. And he always will be the more advanced midfielder out of the two of them, with regards to him and Andre. So it's definitely going to be, that sort of the case, really. Now, I do think in terms of when you look at the players and what it means tactically, let's just take that off here. I do think it's going to be really interesting for Wolves as well, because ultimately Wolves could equally set up like this. They could set up with a 2 with Strand Larsen and Uche. If they really wanted to, they could potentially put all three of them up there. But I do think it could be very interesting, because they could also do something similar to this, where you see the likes of Fer Lopez playing there. And they could do that in certain games when it's a bit tight, because you know that Uche is going to win flick-ons, he's going to knock the ball on, and he's going to be really interesting from that aspect. So again, he's one of them similar to Manetzi, where he'll be a very good facilitator for Jurgen Strand Larsen. And I do think in games we could see something similar to that, because Fer Lopez is very good in those pockets in the middle of the park, and also he has that he could have that license to drift out here or drift out here and just pick up those spaces in between the centre backs and the midfielders. So I do think it'd be very, very interesting to see how Wolves set up next season. But that's just two ways that I think Wolves could go into the season looking if they were to bring Uche in, and I do think it would be a very, very good signing. But let's hear my final thoughts on Uche. Now, how do I feel about the signing of Christantus Uche? Now, for me, it's a very good profile. Someone that's very tall, very physical, and that's been a feature of Vitor Pereira and Wolves' transfer business / targets this summer, really. They've wanted players that are big, strong, physical. And that we look at the likes of Jackson Chachua, who's coming in. He is strong, physical, and he's very, very athletic, and that's something that Wolves have looked at. Of course, Uche is another one. Now, Arias is not big, but he is strong for a player of his height. And again, very athletic. So I think in terms of that athleticism, I think that's one thing that Wolves will need, especially if in those games, like I say, when Wolves are under the cosh, they need hard-working players, they need runners, and players like Uche have got that technical quality on the ball, but also that ability to run and continue running off it, and I think that's something, again, that's so crucial for a side like Wolves to compete. Now, in terms of as a player, I really like him as a profile. I think he'll win plenty of duels. I think he'll win a lot of aerials. I think he'll be very dangerous in both pockets if he is to play as that sort of left-sided number 10, which I think he will replace Matheus Cunha if he was to come in. That will be his role, allowing John Arias to be on that right-hand side, which is ultimately his best position, and we all know it's his best position. I do think it's a very weird one for Fer Lopez, but ultimately, maybe he wasn't in the plans to start a hell of a lot of football this season, and maybe he's just waiting to come into the team next year. Maybe that's the case. But again, another player I think would link well with Strand Larsen. I think Uche is one of these players that wants to create, he wants to get into the box, he wants to be physical, he wants to take on players, and ultimately I think he will create a lot for Strand Larsen, which Strand Larsen is a great footballer. I love Jurgen Strand Larsen, but he just cannot create for himself. He never has been able to. He hasn't this season, he hasn't in pre-season, because that's just not his game. He needs other players around him to facilitate for him to get the best out of him, and ultimately that's what Uche will do, and that's what Uche needs to do, and that's what, if he comes in, I think it's a reasonable sort of deal. Now, if you look at the fee reported as well, it's going to be around 22 million euros, which is just the asking price for him at the moment, which could go up, could come down. But I do think that's a reasonable fee as well, especially in this market. Wolves have been shopping in and around that sort of 12 to 15 range, really, this summer. But I do think they need to up it with regards to maybe £20 million, somewhere around there, which obviously 22 million euros is very similar. So I do think they need to be shopping in and around there, especially when the money is there. We all know the money's there to bring in quality. So ultimately, Wolves need quality. Uche brings quality. He brings excitement. He brings physical presence. He brings pace. He brings dribbling ability, he brings creativity, and he wants to get shots off and make things happen in the final third for Wolves. So ultimately, if Wolves do advance in this deal and do make a move for Christantus Uche, I would be very excited by the prospect of it personally. I think he's one of these players that's definitely going up on his trajectory in his career, and he's one player that Wolves should get in early on personally. Now, let me know what you think about Christantus Uche. If you did enjoy this video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, share it with your friends, share it on social media, on Connor Talks Football, on TikTok and on Twitter, and I'll see you all in the next one.